welcome to Sister Wendy's tour of European art history. Art is a mirror that reflects the era in which it is created. In today's episode, we will delve into 6 artistic eras and explore examples, themes, and techniques of each. The Renaissance was a time of intellectual and artistic rebirth in Europe. Gone were the days of silent and harsh piety as art moved from the monastery to big European cities, changing the artistic world forever. We invite Professor Kathleen Richards to show us one of the many examples of Renaissance art and explain some of the common themes used in the era.
One of the most famous works of art, the Mona Lisa by Leonardo da Vinci, is a classic example of Renaissance art. Da Vinci focuses on the theme of humanism, popular in the time of the Renaissance. Humanists looked back upon classic works of ancient Roman and Greek artists and tried to recreate the beauty and grandeur of their works. They also explored secularism, though religious themes remained present. Leonardo da Vinci focused on the human form and realistic depiction of the human form in many of his paintings, and here in the Mona Lisa. Her classic half-smile realistically portrays human facial expression and natural appearance. Da Vinci's works helped give a name and lasting presence to the Renaissance, and his style has given works like the Mona Lisa their lasting fame.
Surfacing in response to the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s in Europe, Baroque art arose and gained influence first in the Catholic Church as a method to regain popularity. Knowing that the majority of the European population at the time was illiterate, the Catholic Church decided to use art that staggered and overpowered the senses of the viewer to draw back interest. We now invite Professor Alana Rapp to explain a Baroque Caravaggio masterpiece.
Here we have an excellent example of a Baroque painting by Caravaggio, Judith beheading Holofernes. This exquisite piece is a wonderful example from the Baroque era, occurring between the 1500s and the 1800s in Europe. The Baroque era was an artistic movement that was characterized by a central aim of the involved artist to engage the viewer both mentally, physically, and emotionally. The works often include dramatic lighting, frequently focusing upon the faces and expressions of the people in the painting, and a dark background. It was also not unusual for the contents of the painting to be considered imperfect or even grotesque. Baroque paintings can also be often seen containing religious themes or scenes. Baroque art was used by the Catholic Church during the Catholic Counter-Reformation. Elaborate, dramatic, and religious themed, these works hung in churches in an attempt to glorify Catholicism and draw the interest of the public back to them. Depicting the biblical scene of Judith, Caravaggio's masterpiece spotlights the facial expressions of the characters in the painting in a dramatic fashion that draws the viewer's interest and engages them both physically and mentally.
Hello again. Romantic art was a reaction to the Industrial Revolution, the aristocratic social and political norms of the Age of Enlightenment, and the scientific rationalization of nature. Next, I would like to invite Clara Ann without an E Dole from the University of Oxford to explain the Romanticism era and display an example of a piece found in this era.
Romanticism was an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement that originated in Europe toward the end of the 18th century. The Romanticism era was embodied most strongly in the visual arts, music, and literature, but had a major impact on historiography, education, and the natural sciences. Romanticism was characterized by its emphasis on emotion and individualism, as well as the glorification of all the past and nature, preferring the medieval rather than the classic. The movement emphasized intense emotion as an authentic source of experience, placing new emphasis on emotions as apprehension, horror and terror, medieval, in an attempt to escape population growth, early urban sprawl, and industrialism. Emanuel Lutz was a German artist who immigrated to America who painted Washington crossing the Delaware in 1851. His painting evokes patriotic emotion. Romanticism assigned high value to the achievements of heroic individuals and artists like George Washington.
Similar to the Romantic artists, the Realist artists also had a strong opposition to the Industrial Revolution. Next, we will invite Dr. Ayla Pavelka to explain the Realism era and provide an example of a piece that properly portrays the themes and techniques of the realism era.
Here we have an extraordinary example of a painting from the realism era of the late 1800s. Realist painters were strongly opposed to the Industrial Revolution, as this was a form of art that gained steam with the Second Industrial Revolution. As can be seen by these three laboring women in the painting, realist artists worked to expose the reality of everyday life and reveal their viewpoint that the Industrial Revolution may not be so great for everybody. A common theme with this piece and many other works of the realist genre is that they portray life in the depths of the urban wasteland, as some may say, meaning that they expose both the good and the bad of life and disclose the negative effects of the Industrial Revolution. This example, painted by Jean-Francis Millet, was titled The Gleaners and was painted in 1857. It was well known due to its sympathetic nature for the lower classes, which was a quality of many realism paintings.
And now, to talk about the wonderful era of Impressionism, we have historian Victoria Pierce from the University of Uganda.
Boating on the Seine by Pierre Auguste Renoir is an excellent example of Impressionism. Impressionism is a Parisian-based 19th century art movement. During the 1870s and 1880s, the work of these artists brought them prominence. These artists, to illuminate an emphasis on light, would use relatively small, thin, but strong brushstrokes. The subject matter of Impressionist painting was ordinary, everyday things. Impressionism is just what the name makes it out to be. It is simply a snapshot of an impression received by the artist. Impressionist artists do not aim to be accurate in detail. This is not realism or neorealism. Instead, Impressionist artists go for the emotional appeal to be variously triggered in the beholder. Most rules go out the window and it becomes an expression of the heart. And this painting exhibits a masterful use of small brushstrokes to capture all the depth of the water, the blades of grass and even their grains of sand on the beach. Light and luminous color are everywhere. In their white dresses, the white sail, the houses, and all the reflections on the lake masterfully shine through the brushstrokes of the artist. The subject matter of the painting isn't anything terribly unusual. It is simply two girls paddling a boat on a lake, which is quite ordinary. Though these artists created a following for themselves over the years, the initial responses to Impressionism were harsh and bitter. Many believed that the artists were unskilled and sold unfinished pieces of art because of the imperfect brushstroke texture.
In contrast to Impressionism, Expressionist paintings were not as visually pleasing. The purpose of painting was instead to express the anxiety of the European people. We now turn to historian Heather Wilhelm to further explain Expressionism.
Expressionist paintings were produced throughout Germany in the late 1800s and the early 1900s in response to the intense anxiety throughout the world. These paintings often use strong colors and show distorted bodies following the themes of death, raw emotion, and yearning. The Scream was painted by Edvard Munch in 1893, and many historians believe that it started the Expressionist movements. The painting portrays a unisex individual screaming in pure horror. The scream relates to the population's fear of a loss of spirituality and a deep relation with the rest of the world.